Welcome to the Calaveras Campfire, an audio odyssey brought to you in partnership with the CalaSCAREus Film Festival. Each month we bring you a new chilling tale of monsters and myths, ghosts and legends, the dark side of Calaveras County. So take off your pack, rest your boots, and settle in for a spell. We've been waiting for you.
Well, as I live and breathe, look who made it back. I'll admit I wasn't sure you would. This time of year gets busy, folks running from one place to the next, spending money they don't really have, trying to squeeze a whole year's worth of togetherness into a couple of cold weeks. Nothing wrong with it. Family's important, always has been. Just never really been something I had much use for myself. Still, I'm glad you carved out a little time. Means more than you might think. One thing about the holidays, they got a way of digging up stories nobody likes to tell. The ones that don't fit real nice on a postcard. The ones folks quietly agree to forget. Like the one about the Calaveras Monster and what happened in a logging camp on Christmas Eve, 1939. You ever hear about the Silver Pine Christmas Massacre? Calaveras County's known for its terrain, big hills, deep caverns, places you can walk a whole day and still feel like the land's just getting started. Folks come for the lakes, New Melones, Hogan, Lake Comanche, spots where the folks fish, boat and camp, places where the pines lean in close and the water stays cold year-round. And towering above it all is Corral Ridge, highest point in the whole county. Granite shoulders punching up into the sky, snow that sticks half the year, forest so thick that daylight gets lost on its way down. But here's what most folks don't know. Corral Ridge is a name they gave it after everything went wrong. Long before the roads and the saws, the Miwok called the place Ayum Tala, and they respected it more than most folks respect church on Sunday. They said the ridge was protected, watched over by something old, something with roots deeper than the bedrock. Back in 1922, a survey crew went up there. 6 men sent to flag timber and test the slopes. Strong fellas who knew what they were doing. 2 weeks later, their equipment was found scattered at the base of a cliff on the far side of the ridge. Bits of saw frame twisted up like tin, mule harnesses torn like paper, and blood still dripping off the rocks, but not a single body. Official word was that a storm must have blown through, knocked them off their footing, sent the whole crew over the edge of the cliff. Terrible accident, they said. Nature can be cruel. But here's what didn't make the papers. When the company went up to collect what gear hadn't fallen, what they found? Axes bent at the handles, tents ripped to ribbons, and red stains smeared across the dirt leading away from the cliff, not toward it. There were drag marks, broken tree limbs, and a single boot still standing upright in the soil. Whatever happened up there was buried quick. Too many questions, not enough answers. People whispered, rumors spread, and the ridge was quietly marked down as untouchable. Through the 1930s, Calaveras was booming with lumber outfits, and companies like Blagan Lumber were making a mark carving into the lower slopes. And working for Blagan at the time was a man named Elias Calhoun. Now, Elias wasn't just another axe slinger. He was a thinker, a quiet mountain of a man who was smarter than he ever got credit for. During the Great War, he'd served in the Army Engineers, learned to rig cable systems, haul weight in and out of hard-to-reach places. With competition steep in the lower hills, Elias started looking toward the ridge. He knew the real timber was up high, old-growth giants that nobody had the guts to touch. He heard the rumors, the stories, but to him that's all they were. Superstition and hogwash. Tackling that ridge had become his obsession. So one day he takes his maps and his measurements and he marches them right into the boss's office and lays it all out plain. "We take the high ridge," he says. "We take the future." His boss just laughs and shakes his head. He says the slope's too rough, the risks are too many. Then he hands Elias his axe and says, "Stick to what you're good at." Well, Elias dropped that axe right there at his boots. He scooped up his maps, tipped his cap, and calmly walked away from Blagan Lumber. On his walk home, Elias thought about all the things he'd never done before. Permits, crews, supplies. Hell, he didn't know the first thing about running a business, but he did know who he'd do it with. He had his boys. Jack, his oldest, was 21, steady as a rock and just as stubborn. Took after his father with his calm demeanor. His younger brother, Mose, was 18 and all fire and fists, quick to laugh and quicker to fight. The kind of kid who never backed down from anything. Elias got home that evening, laid his maps out on the kitchen table. He told him what he'd done at the mill, told him he had his sights set on the ridge, walked him through his idea, explaining how you could run cable up one face of the mountain and bring logs down the other, so he asked his sons if they'd work with him. And they agreed, not as kids, but as partners, as men. A couple days later, Elias cleaned himself up as best a logger could and made the trip to the county offices in San Andreas. Laid his maps out on a sturdy oak desk across from a man by the name of Harold McBride. McBride studied the maps, then studied the man holding them. He had served in the Great War, too, and recognized an Army engineer when he saw one. McBride believed a man who built bridges through enemy fire could figure out how to bring down a few trees off a steep ridge, and he respected someone who didn't shy away from hard work just because others had said it couldn't be done. So McBride approved the timber rights for the ridge. The whole deal was settled with a simple handshake, and just like that, Calhoun and Sons was in business. That same day, Elias paid visits to a few men he trusted, hardened loggers with honest backs and steady hands. He pitched his ideas, offered up partnerships. They all said yes, without hesitation. By the end of the week, 2 flatbed trucks were backed into the old loading yard just outside San Andreas. Crates of dried goods, fuel cans, coils of steel cable, pulleys, saws, axes, every tool they could afford stacked into the beds like a jigsaw puzzle. They drove as far as the old logging roads would take them. The higher they climbed, the rougher the earth got, till the tires finally spun in the loose rock and stubborn grade. From there, the real climb began. They unloaded 4 mules and shifted the last loads onto their backs. The ridge was still several miles out, but spirits were high, and the men started their trek to Ayumtala. The climb wasn't kind, but the view, Lord, the view made a man feel small in the best possible way. The trail cut steep through rocks and roots, with tall pines marching up the slopes, sun glittering off granite like scattered snow. They walked in a tight line, mules steady between them. At about midway, Jack slowed up. He'd seen something, a shape slipping between the trees. Just a flicker. There, then gone. He pointed it out, but Mose just laughed it off. One of the others said it was probably just a deer. Jack didn't push the matter, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Hours rolled by, shadows stretched, the air thinned, and just before the light started dying, the trees opened up before them, and there it was, the ridge. With dark setting in, there wasn't much time for anything. Elias picked a flat stretch just below the crest, and the men got to work. The tents went up quick, and the men barely spoke. Everyone was dead on their feet. By the time the last stake was driven, they were already climbing inside. 8 men, fast asleep in minutes. The morning light came early on the ridge, and Elias was the first one up. He stepped outside, stretched the stiffness from his back, and breathed in air so clean it almost stung. But something else caught his attention right away. 3 mules, not 4. He reached back into his tent, pulled his rifle free, walked toward the tether post. The rope's knot was still tied, tight and neat, but the line itself had been snapped, pulled apart until the fibers burst. Jack came up behind him a moment later and asked what it could have been, but Elias steadied him with a look. The ridge was wild country, and until they had a proper camp built, they were just guests in whatever called this place home. Before long, the rest of the men were stirring, and the quiet morning came alive with the tired sounds of work. They needed a permanent camp, something solid, defensible, and close enough to the right timber. He left Mose and 3 of the men to break down the tents and keep an eye on the mules. Then he took Jack and 2 others and set off toward the upper meadow. Elias had studied his maps well, and he knew of a clearing that was the likeliest spot for a proper base. Ayumtala was a ridge of about 300 acres, long and narrow, shaped almost like the back of a great sleeping animal. The spine of it ran east to west with a steep cliff along the northern edge where the granite dropped straight into the treetops below. The southern side sloped lower, covered in thick pines and old growth that had never seen a saw. Most of the ridge was tight forest with uneven ground, rock shelves, and trees packed close enough to darken the floor even in daylight. But right near the center, where the land rose a little higher, there was a natural clearing, a stretch of flat ground maybe 5 or 6 acres wide, the upper meadow. That was the spot Elias had marked, high enough to give him a vantage, level enough for cabins and a winch platform, and close to the best stands of timber on the ridge. The group trekked along the crest and through the thick timber until the trees cleared way and the upper meadow came into view. Once they stepped into the center of the meadow, Elias turned a slow circle, taking in the lay of the land. He stopped when he saw what he'd been looking for. Off toward the western rise stood a pine unlike the others, tall, straight, bark pale enough to catch the morning light like brushed metal, a natural tower, perfect height, perfect placement, a spar tree if there ever was one. Elias nodded. That was it, the anchor, the heart of the whole operation. He marked the spot on his map. Then he drove a stake into the soil, a simple wooden peg, but it meant more to those men than any flag. That was the future they'd come for. All right, Elias said, let's get our gear. The men walked back toward the tree line with a little more spring in their step. Elias had been right. The ridge was workable. The plan would hold. They were almost to the far edge of the meadow when a sound rolled across the ridge. High at first, then dropping low and bending into something like a howl swallowed by a scream, not human, unlike anything the men had heard in all their years. It echoed off the cliff face, carrying clear across the meadow before dying into the trees. Rifles came up without a word. One of the crew muttered a curse under his breath. Another asked what in God's name that could have been. Elias listened for a moment, eyes fixed on the wind. Then he told them to steady themselves. Up here echoes bounced strange. Could have been an elk. Could have been anything. No sense losing their heads over a sound in the woods. But he reminded them to stay sharp, watch the tree line, keep aware. Then they turned and headed down the path back to the others. By early evening, the meadow was starting to look like a real camp. The tents were set in a wide circle. Mose and the others had thrown together a sturdier pen for the mules. A small cook fire burned in the middle of the camp, and the men sat around it with tin plates in their laps, tired and dirty from a long day's work. Elias stood looking toward the western rise where the tall, pale pine stood. Even in the low light, it held that faint shimmer. He turned back to the fire and lifted his cup. He told the men a place like this needed a name if they were going to build something worth keeping. To Silver Pine, he said, to the work ahead and to each other. The men echoed the toast, and with that, Silver Pine Logging Camp started operation. Over the next week, Silver Pine found its rhythm. The men cleared brush, cut a trail to the spar tree, started setting the first cables. Mules hauled tools, axes rang, and the ridge for a while felt almost tame. Then, one morning, Moses came rushing in from the western line with two of the men behind him. They'd gone out to check the rig they'd staged near the spar tree, a heavy winch base that Elias wanted leveled and ready before the big cables went up. But it wasn't right. Oh, not the way they found it. The bolts had been twisted loose. A steel bracket, thick as a man's palm, lay cracked down the center like somebody had folded it. The ground around the platform was churned up, but not by boots. No prints Elias recognized, just deep gouges and drag marks. Something heavy had moved through there in the dark, but there was no time to waste. If the winch stayed down, the whole operation stalled. Elias made the call fast. He took Mose and they started the long walk back to the trucks. By midday, they were rolling down the old logging road toward San Andreas. When the truck rolled into town, Elias didn't waste a minute. Went straight to the yard behind the hardware store and gathered everything they needed to fix the winch. Brackets, bolts, grease caps, fresh cable fittings. He loaded the parts himself while Mose checked the fuel and water. Inside the hardware store, Elias laid a coil of logging chain and 3 heavy bear traps on the counter, big iron jaws meant for mountain predators. Behind the counter was an old man with long gray hair, eyes sharp as tacks. The old man rested a hand on the traps.
"You taking these up high?"
he said, not a question. Elias didn't answer. The old man nodded.
"Those won't stop him."
Elias felt something pulled tight in his chest. "What makes you see that?" The old man lifted his gaze.
"Hakama,"
he said.
"That ridge is his, always has been. You set your traps, build your lines. Won't matter. He don't want men up there."
Elias tried to shrug it off, but the old man kept talking, quieter now.
"He came down alive. That's luck.
He tapped the counter with one finger.
If you go back, I am Tala will take what it's owed."
Elias slid the money across the counter. "Appreciate the warning," he said. The old man bagged the small parts, but left the traps sitting on the counter.
"Climb again? You won't come back down,"
he murmured. Elias picked up the iron jaws and walked out into the sunlight without another word. He and Mose left town with the sun already dropping. By the time they reached the end of the logging road, the light was nearly gone. They loaded all the parts and traps onto their backs and started the climb. The trail was worse at night, steep, cold, far too quiet. But they pushed through it, driven more by necessity than comfort. Hours passed in darkness, broken only by the scrape of boots and the weight of what they carried. At last, firelight appeared through the trees. Silver Pine. Jack was standing watch at the edge of camp when he saw them step into the clearing. He met them with a hard look. "Get some rest," he said. "When you get up, I got something to show you." A few hours later, Jack led Elias beyond the eastern edge of camp to a patch of soft earth between two boulders, and that's where Elias saw what had gotten Jack so worked up. Footprints, huge ones deep enough to pool with the morning frost, spaced wide like whatever made them walked with a giant stride, and the shape, God help them, the shape looked more like a man's than any animal. Long heel, broad forefoot, 5 distinct toes pressed deep. Each print measured close to 2 feet from heel to toe. Elias crouched beside one, running a hand along the edge of the impression. A creature that left tracks like these would stand 10, maybe 12 feet tall. The old man in town might have been right. Were the traps he bought going to be enough to stop this thing? He steadied Jack with a hand on the shoulder and told him they'd figure it out. Fear or no fear, the ridge wasn't going to wait. There was work to do. By mid-morning, the winch was running again. Fresh brackets were bolted in, new cable was stretched tight, and the crews wasted no time dropping trees. While the others worked the timber line, Elias pulled the bear traps aside and called Jack over. 3 steel traps meant for anything short of a grizzly, but nowhere near big enough for whatever broke their winch and left those prints. So father and son tore 'em down. They pulled pins and unseated springs. They laid the jaws out in pieces across a canvas tarp. Elias sketched a quick shape in his sketchbook, and Jack understood right away. They bolted the strongest jaws together, crossed and reinforced the frames, and built a single trap. It was broad as a wagon wheel with teeth set wide enough to catch a damned elephant. Wasn't pretty, but it had closed with enough force to break a railroad tie. When they finished, they carried it to the spot where Jack had shown Elias the prints. They set the trigger plate, hid the jaws beneath pine needles. As night fell and the men settled slowly in around the fire for supper, none of them could shake the feeling that something was off. Elias couldn't sleep. Lay in his tent for what felt like hours, staring at the canvas roof, listening to every creak of the ridge. When Mose finally nudged him for his turn on watch, Elias was already sitting up, pulling on his coat. He stepped out into the cold night, rifle slung over one shoulder, flashlight in hand, and made a slow walk around camp. When the circuit was done, he moved to the far edge of the meadow, where he had a clean view of the area. He sat on a stump and let the darkness settle around him. Minutes passed, maybe more. Then he felt something. Felt something before he heard it. A faint tremor underfoot, a low rumble somewhere in the trees. A second thud followed, heavier this time. Elias rose slowly and clicked on his flashlight. He aimed it toward the noise and swept the beam across the timber. Elias's chest tightened. The echoes were confusing up here. The steps sounded near, then sounded far, then near again, as if the ridge itself couldn't decide where the thing was. He killed the flashlight, set it down. Both hands went to the rifle. The footsteps kept advancing. He aimed into the dark and held his breath, trying to pin down a shape, a shadow, anything. But the night swallowed everything beyond him. Then the footsteps grew louder. Whatever it wasn't circling. It was coming right toward him. Then they stopped. Silence crushing in around him. Elias could hear his heartbeat in his ears. He could hear the strain in his own breathing. He waited and waiting. Elias flinched, squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked like lightning, tearing the night apart, and the muzzle flash lit the trees for half a heartbeat. And in that burst of light, he saw something that didn't belong. A huge shape rushing straight at him, too tall, too wide. A mass of moving black that filled the space between the trees, and a face, wild eyes, and a wide mouth split open around jagged teeth. Then the light was gone. Before Elias could register what he saw, the thing slammed into him. The impact lifted him clean off his feet, sent him flying backwards. He hit the ground, flat on his back. The breath blasted out of his lungs, and his rifle tore free from his hands and vanished into the dark. Elias lay there, stars spinning overhead while his lungs burned for air. Then his eyes adjusted, and he could see the thing. It was standing there, right at the edge of the trees. Stood damn near 10 feet tall if it was an inch, and it stank wet fur, rusted iron, and rot. It had broad shoulders, arms, long arms that hung too low, its thick chest pulled tight with muscle, and patchy, filthy hair that clung to it in uneven mats. Its head sat low between its shoulders. The face was wrong, flat, and terrible. The eyes burned dull yellow in the dark, set deep under a heavy brow. Its mouth hung open as it breathed. Its huge shoulders rose and fell as each breath rolled out of it in thick white clouds. His hands were massive, with palms the size of shovels. Its thick fingers tipped with dark claws that curved forward and caught the starlight when it shifted its weight. Its huge legs flexed under it, the ground bent beneath its tensed feet, and Elias could feel it. It was gonna finish him. Then the shouting broke through the trees. Jack's voice, Moses, men crashing through brush, boots pounding, guns coming up as they ran towards the sound of the shot. The thing whipped its head toward them. It took in the noise, the movement, the number of men. Then it turned back to Elias, slow. Those yellow eyes locked onto him and held, long enough to make sure Elias understood that this wasn't over. Then it turned and ran. Elias listened as the footsteps tore off through the trees, and for a long moment he didn't move. He didn't blink. He didn't even breathe. Then feet approached from behind him. Shapes rushed into his vision. Voices called his name. Hands grabbed his shoulders, shook him, trying to get him to look at them. He didn't answer. He just kept staring at the trees where the thing had stood. Then, bang! Metal slammed shut somewhere up the ridge. The sound cracked through the night like a cannon. And then came the scream. It wasn't one sound, it was many, stacked on top of each other, low and thunderous, like the mountain itself was groaning, and high, sharp enough to make your teeth ache. It poured out of the trees in a solid wave, rattling chests and pounding skulls. The men staggered, hands flew up to covered ears. One of them dropped to a knee. The sound pinned them in place. The scream tore through the forest and stretched on until it felt like it would never end. Then it broke off, just gone. For a moment the ridge held its breath. Then Elias was moving. He broke across camp at a dead run straight toward the eastern line. The men were up behind him, scrambling to keep pace. They found the trap between the two boulders where Elias had set it earlier. The chain was pulled straight, stretched hard enough to bend the anchor ring, and the steel teeth were locked tight around something that shouldn't exist. A leg thick as a fence post from just below the knee down, white bone with strings of muscle still clinging to the metal like they'd been ripped apart by a hand. It was covered in dark, matted hair, soaked black. The foot was twisted and curled inward, its claws dug into the dirt. A red pool soaked the ground around the trap. It smeared and dragged away in a heavy line that pointed straight into the trees beyond. Elias lifted his flashlight and followed it. Jack and Mose stayed tight behind him. The beam bounced as he moved, catching red on bark, on rock, on snapped branches. The trail cut straight, careless of footing, but Elias didn't slow. His eyes stayed down, step after step. The blood pulled him forward. Then someone grabbed him from behind. Hands clasped onto his coat and yanked him hard, dragging him backward just as his next step went nowhere. Elias stumbled, and only then did he look up. The forest ended. The ground dropped away without warning. No slope, just empty space and black air. The cliff fell straight down into nothing. The blood trail didn't turn. It didn't end. It ran right to the lip of the cliff and vanished. They stood there a long while, staring into the black. That damned thing had set its own trap, and he almost walked right into it. With a cold stare and a silent vow, Elias turned to his boys, and they started back through the trees. Months passed. Silver Pine changed. The tents were gone, replaced by cabins, one for each man. A cookhouse sat at the center of the camp, and inside, mounted high on a wall above the long table, hung the leg they'd taken from the monster. They set the cabins in a loose ring, all facing inward toward the cookhouse. Clear lines of sight, no blind corners. Silver Pine was finally starting to get quiet again. It had been hell getting anything done once word got out. Yes, sir, their little encounter didn't stay quiet for long. Before they knew it, Silver Pine was the center of attention. A monster attack? With proof? The papers ate it up. Loggers kill monsters in High Ridge Camp. Calaveras Monster brought down by axemen. Ridge horror slain. Proof recovered. Reporters came first. Curious folks followed. Men in business suits, women in Sunday dresses. Old, young, they all made the climb to see the leg and hear the story. Some believed every word, others said it was a hoax. Said the leg looked wrong, like it was stitched together from a bear and a mule and a little bit of snake oil. I don't know. Looked plenty real if you ask me. Papers ran the story for a while, argued back and forth. Then, as they always do, moved on to something else. Silver Pine didn't. They stayed steady. More traps went in. Bigger ones, iron jaws, snares, pits masked with earth, all circling the perimeter of the camp. But nothing came. No sounds in the dark. No broken gear, no tracks, no footsteps. Elias told himself maybe the thing had bled out, or fallen, or crawled off somewhere to die. By the time winter arrived, the men at Silver Pine had settled into their routine. They still checked the traps, scanned the tree line, but that edge had started to dull. Elias was right. The ridge was tamed, and Calhoun and Sons was a success. There was talk of expanding come spring. More hands, more lines, a real future. For the first time since they'd arrived, the men allowed themselves to believe the worst was behind them. And it was. Right up until Christmas Eve of 1939. The cookhouse was warm and lively that night. Lamplight pooled against the walls, and the long table was crowded with festive men, full bellies and empty plates. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, dressed in wire, and small carvings whittled during breaks. The smells of pine sap, grease, and coffee filled the room. Elias sat back on his bench, looked at his boys. Jack talking with his hands, Mose grinning. Couldn't help but be filled with pride. Someone laughed and slapped the table. A chair just scraped. Elias barely noticed it at first. Just another sound underneath everything else. Easy to lose in the room. Elias looked up, locked his eyes on the leg mounted to the wall. One of the men stood up to refill his coffee. Elias's smile faded. He turned his head slightly, listening past the voice and the clatter. Elias straightened. The sound came again, heavier this time, closer. The laughter thinned. A sentence trailed off unfinished. One man cleared his throat. Elias felt the room getting smaller, like the walls had leaned in a fraction. The light from the stove flickered. Shadows stretched and pulled wrong along the planks. Even closer, Jack saw his father's face change and felt it hit his gut all at once. Mose followed Jack's stare. The floor trembled faintly. A cup tipped and spilled. Elias's eyes went to the door. No rifles, no shotguns. Empty hooks. They'd come to celebrate. They hadn't brought a single gun. The Christmas tree rattled in the corner. One of the little wooden ornaments knocked loose and dropped to the floor with a clack that sounded impossibly loud. So close, Elias could feel her through the soles of his boots. Every man held their breath. It felt like the damn thing was right next to him. Then, nothing. The sound stopped. The silence rushed in so fast it felt loud enough to make Elias's ears ring. No one moved. 8 men frozen stiff. For half a second, nothing happened. Elias started to exhale. And then the wall blew inward. Wood-shattered planks burst apart in a spray of splinters and frozen air. The entire side of the cookhouse collapsed as something enormous mashed through it. Elias barely had time to see it. The creature reached out in a single lunge and wrapped Mose up in both arms. One arm wrapped around his chest, the other clamped over his head. There was a sharp, ugly crack as ribs gave way. One massive hand crushed the boy's chest, and the other tore across his face and neck in a single brutal motion. Blood sprayed the table as Mose came apart in the creature's arms. Elias could only watch in horror as the creature threw its head back and roared. It blasted through the cookhouse and pinned the men in place, vibrating skulls, rattling teeth. Elias slapped his hands over his ears, but it didn't matter. The roar filled everything. Boards groaned, plates and cups fell to the ground, and through the noise and the chaos, Elias forced his eyes open to take the beast in. The thing was tore up for sure. Old scars split its hide in thick, pale lines. One side of its body rose higher, bunched and ugly where it had healed wrong. Its chest heaved as it roared, cords standing out under the skin, Moses' blood streaming from its hands. And then Elias saw its leg. Where one of its legs should have been was a stump, with a length of wood driven straight into it. The flesh had closed around it, swollen, scarred. The wood was dark and knotted, its ends smashed flat from bearing weight. The roar cut off, and then the monster moved. It lunged forward and cleared the length of the table in one savage bound. It came down near 2 men that never even had time to scream. One was knocked flat, crushed in an instant. The other was seized mid-turn and slammed down so hard the floorboards split beneath him. A red mist sprayed the wall as the impact rattled the room. Elias looked at Jack. His boy stood frozen near the table, eyes locked on the monster. Elias had seen that before, in young soldiers who hadn't learned how fast death moved. Something old and hard snapped into place, and Elias seized Jack by the collar, hauling him backward so hard his feet left the floor. Jack stumbled, but Elias dragged him upright without slowing. "Move," Elias growled. They ran. Elias shoved Jack toward the door, and they burst into the cold. The other men poured out behind them, 3 shapes scrambling through the doorway all at once. Then something hit from inside. One of the men never made it out. The creature tore him backward through the door frame, wood cracking around his body. The monster took hold of both the man's arms and pulled. The man screamed once, was ripped apart, shooting gore across the snow. Elias didn't stop. He hauled Jack toward his cabin, trying not to slip. To his left, the other 2 men split off, running hard for their own shelters. Then a roar burst again from behind. One of the men made it halfway across the clearing before the monster caught him. Elias saw it out of the corner of his eye, a massive shape slamming into the runner from behind. The man went down screaming and was dragged across the snow as his claws opened him from shoulder to hip. Red streaked the ground behind them, the scream cut off, wet and sudden. Elias shoved Jack up onto the porch of his cabin. Inside, he barked. Jack stumbled through the door. Elias was right behind him, just as another scream tore through the night. The last man had reached his cabin. For half a second, Elias thought he'd made it. Then the monster hit him. It plowed straight through the man and the cabin together. Wood exploded out as they both vanished inside a shower of crimson splinters. Elias threw his shoulder into his own door and dropped an iron bar lock into place. "Get down," he snapped. Jack hit the floor without a word. Elias snatched his rifle from the wall, brought it up, sight fixed on the door. His breath came slow and forced, every sense screaming. It was along the western wall. And it was behind them. The steps echoed around the cabin in unnatural patterns. The steps stopped right outside the door. Elias tightened his grip. The door frame creaked. Elias fired. The rifle cracked deafeningly inside the cabin. At the same instant, the wall behind him imploded. The monster smashed through the planks where Jack had been seconds before. The force of it threw Elias across the room. He hit the floor hard, his rifle skittering out of reach. He was only down for a second, but by the time he looked up, the wall was gone, the monster was gone, and Jack was gone. Blood streaked the broken boards and trailed out into the snow beyond. Deep grooves cut through the drifts where Jack had been dragged away. Then Elias heard it. Jack's scream fading fast into the trees. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed his rifle and ran, just instinct and fury pulling him forward. Elias ran blindly through the trees, crashing through brush and low branches, slipping on snow and rocks. He didn't slow, he didn't even think. The path ahead was marked with Jack's screams and red snow. Then the trees opened into a small clearing, near perfectly round, like it had been cut out of the forest. The blood trail stopped in the center, just stopped. Elias followed suit and spun, rifle up. Jack's screams were gone. The sound came from his right. Then behind him. It was circling him. Too close now, just off his left shoulder. Elias turned and fired. The shot split the clearing open, and Jack fell. Elias saw it all at once. The truth hit harder than the recoil. Jack's jaw was shattered, hanging slack and wrong. His left leg bent at an angle it shouldn't, dragging useless behind him. Elias dropped the rifle and ran. He fell to his knees beside Jack, hands shaken, pressing down where there was nothing left to save. Jack tried to breathe, couldn't. His eyes found his father's. And then they went empty. The moonlight behind Elias vanished. He turned. The monster stood there at the edge of the clearing, close enough now that he could see its yellow eyes burning in the dark. For a breath, neither of them moved. Then the forest erupted with sound. Elias screaming, the monster roaring back. The noise tore through the forest and rolled out across the ridge, echoing once, then breaking apart into nothing. About a week passed before anyone went looking. Snow had been falling off and on in the high country. No logs had come down the mountain. No word, no signal smoke, nothing. So a small group was put together to head up to check in. A couple of local men reached what was left of Silver Pine at midday, and the first thing they saw were the trees. And oh my, the pines surrounding the camp had been decorated for the holidays. Dark stains streaked the bark, thick frozen smears marked where something had been dragged or thrown. Branches sagged under the weight of things that didn't belong there. Lines and lengths of intestines looped and draped like garland. A liver hung split open on a lower limb. A heart had been punched clean through by a broken branch. Higher up, heavier pieces were caught where they'd been flung and left to stick. Meat, organs, wet shapes, all hanging in the pines like some obscene mockery. There were no bodies, just what was left of men, spread thin and wide across the ridge. They pushed through the trees until they reached the camp. Cabins that had once stood tight and square were torn apart. Split and scattered like kindling, doors lay snapped in half. Roof beams were broken and twisted, driven into the snow at odd angles, and the blood everywhere you looked seemed to be touched by it. The cookhouse had collapsed. The mounted leg was nowhere to be found. The winch was ruined, its cables lay strewn across the clearing, pulled apart strand by strand. The spar tree platform had been ripped free, dragged and shattered against the rocks. Nothing had been spared. The search party left before dark finished settling in. No one wanted to be there after nightfall. None of them ever wanted to set foot on that ridge again. And they didn't. Silver Pine was left for the mountain to take back, and the ridge was marked off. Quietly, officially, the report said structural collapse, animal activity, unrecoverable remains. The name faded next, stopped showing up in paperwork, then in conversation, then in memory. You won't find Silver Pine on any modern map, and you won't find it in the county records unless you know exactly where to look, and even then it's thin. What's left of the place goes by another name now. Corral Ridge, a scenic overlook, a hiking trail, a high point folks drive up to for the few, never knowing what once stood there. Now folks like to say the forest up there feels wrong, that the wind goes quiet sometimes, that the birds don't sing the way they oughta. But you don't need to lose any sleep over it. Whatever happened on Corral Ridge, whatever tore Silver Pine apart, hasn't made a peep since that night. No tracks, no screams, no dragon steps echoing through the trees. So you're safe enough. Still, watch your footing. And if you hear something odd on your walk back down the trail, a heavy step, maybe, well, don't panic. Probably just the trees settling. Probably. Well, now, where did the time go? I told you I can get a little carried away every now and then. But this fire's dying out, and I think it's about time to rest these old bones. But we're just getting started. So if you're feeling up for it, I'll be right here next month with another story. Same campfire, same hillside. Hope to see you then. Until next time, friend.
This has been the Calaveras Campfire. These tales have been created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblances to real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. All stories written, directed, and edited by Steve Carlton. Recorded by Sarah Armstrong Garner. And voiced by Cedric Clute. Thanks for joining us by the fire. We'll see you at the next one.